Hi, and welcome to RealClearFetish Talks RealClearPlay, a podcast that dives into fetish life, sober life, and everything in between. This episode is the final of the season, and it's a bit special because I'm filming in my new home where I've moved to, and my guest is in the room with me. Hi, Ben.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very good, thank you.
Yeah. Well, as with every episode I've done, we do 4 standard questions at the start of the episode, and then we'll just see where the conversation goes.
Cool.
Yeah? What do you prefer I call you? Names, pronouns, and title.
Oh, Mutt, really, in a sexy situation type thing. Although you've known me for long enough to know my real name, and he, him, his.
He, him, has any titles?
No, I don't think so. Oh, Bestest Mutt.
Bestest Mutt.
I am Bestest Mutt 2024.
For one person.
Bestest Mutt for one person. Absolutely.
Well, that counts. That's a title. Get a t-shirt made for that. Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm 42. I have spent most of my adult life in London, apart from a few years in Berlin. I was something of a mess for my first decade in London, but now I'm clean and sober for 12 and a half years or so.
Well done.
What else is to know? I'm something of a geek. Some people sometimes recognize my Star Trek tattoo, so sort of geekiness, and I don't know, just being a little bit silly, I think, is one of the key things that defines me. And if people haven't seen it on Twitter, I have done some amateur porn. Kind of stopped doing that recently, but very much, well, my kink is fisting, obviously in the context of sober play. Everyone knows why that's quite an interesting topic, because a lot of fisting isn't done sober. I actually have been out essentially on the fetish scene since I was 21, I think. Back when the club Fist still existed, where I went purely for the music. And I know people don't believe me, but I was much more innocent back then. And I did have my little leather shorts and stuff, like my first fetish gear. So it's just like my early days in the sort of fetish scene were wearing the gear, but being there for the music. And yes, that kind of did turn into also like having sex out in public or in venues and stuff. But actually, I think quite a lot, because I also went to Hard On as well, it still was a lot about the music for me. I also was a regular at the Hoist back when that still existed. And so, I think, it's interesting, like, I don't know of anybody who's ever identified with one particular fetish in terms of gear, but I'd say I definitely identify with one form of fetish in that I'm most definitely into fisting.
I've seen.
You participated.
I have. You've already kind of answered the question, but I will ask it anyway. Completely sober, clear-headed, or social drinker?
Yeah, completely clean and sober. I'm in recovery. I actually started my recovery journey outside of AA, because there were a couple of attempts. First of all, to have a reset with my drinking, because I thought I would still be able to, and then I went back to drinking, and then it was bad, and then I stopped, and then I started again, and it was bad, and then I got into AA. And since I got to AA, I've been completely clean and sober. So the not the dividing line, like one of the topics, I guess, is always around poppers in the recovery community. It was really simple for me. I just never liked them anyway. So I am completely like clear-headed all time. I have not necessarily got flexible boundaries with other guys. Like I certainly don't mind them doing poppers, but as long as they don't get completely out of it. This is my thing about, like, I want you to be clear-headed enough with me to be present and participating. So, maybe they have a beer or a bit of poppers. Some guys have had a bit of weed or whatever. But what's important to me from them is that they're present.
Yeah, for me, poppers was also like, I don't like them. They give me a headache. If someone's in recovery and they're still using poppers, I would never shame them for it. And I wouldn't say, it depends on how you use them. If it's like to relax when you're being fucked or fisted and you're in recovery, I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. That's what everyone is individual when it comes to recovery.
Yeah, sure.
And it's so important. But also, like you, if I'm playing with someone, I also prefer they're not huffing that bottle the whole time.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, the type that comes out of the dark room with the crusty nose.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, that's not me.
Sexy.
No, not so sexy. Not so sexy. What is clear play to you, and why is it important?
I think, I mean, the important bit is much more simple. Like, I'm in recovery, and that's a very core part of my identity. I mean, I guess, as you know, introduce myself, I identify as a recovering alcoholic. Therefore, sort of clear-headed sober play is important to me, and I find that's like a healthy approach to kinky sex for me. Yeah, I think it is just about being present. Actually, I think. I mean, what I've also learned, particularly now that I'm in a polyamorous relationship, is not just being present, but connection is like, I kind of knew connection was important, but I was still going out and, you know, having random sex, like going to sex bars and stuff. And now I'm even at the point that I was just like, oh God, the connection bit is actually really, really important for me. I mean, put it bluntly, I can't get hard if there's just nothing there.
Yeah.
Just like, yeah, it's not working. So I think the being present, the connection, and I think particularly because of fisting, that we can't pretend it can't be dangerous. Like, you need to know what you're doing.
Yeah.
And therefore, being present, being conscious, it's not just important to enjoying the experience, but I think it's important to enjoying it safely. I guess there's just little side things, you know, like literally like what you put in your butt to make your butt relax. We've talked about poppers, but like some guys are like, oh, like I like to use lidocaine, and even that I'm just like, it's not necessarily a problem with drugs, but I'm like, there's something there that like it could be a risk to you. So I think I want people to be aware of what is going on with their body. I want, and I you know, if I'm bottoming, which is obviously most of the time, I was like, I need you to be conscious of how I'm reacting. Like, you need to know that like the body language might indicate, yeah, what you're doing is not so comfortable, or I need you to stop. So I think the connection, the acknowledgement, the understanding is all kind of, yeah, a critical part to the play for me.
Yeah, you can't really have someone fisting your hole and their eyes are dotting everywhere else besides what they're actually doing.
Yeah, it's really off-putting as well, because it was like, no, I'm the center of attention right now. Hello. Yeah, so I'd like, I mean, there's a really kind of little funny anecdote here that there's a fisting bar in Gran Canaria, which has like about 7 slings lined up. And 6 of them are literally one after the other. And one of the things that I really like about it is you're pretty much like, you're face to face and things are at the side of you, but it's not so much of a distraction. Like, you can maintain this like focus, like with the person that you're playing with, and know that other stuff's going on. Yeah, you can have a little look around, but I actually really love that for the most part, there's no distractions. It makes for this very personal connection.
It's like if you go to a party like a laboratory in Berlin, and there's like this singular sling in the middle of a room, and there's people wandering around. It's very, even I, as a fisting top, can get distracted by the people walking around, and that's even as a sober person, because we do like the owl impression, is like dotting around even if you're sober. So I also like fisting. For me, I prefer it in private because it's less distracting. Someone with me with ADHD, I just like, oh, shiny, and that's not great when you're trying to have a connection with someone. But yeah, it's important with the connection. It's quite fun to like imagine the 6 slings next to each other. I think the only time I've seen that was this alcove in a big space where it was almost like a car showroom with slings all the way around. So whoever was fisting over there could look over to the other side and see who was fisting over there. But that's the only one. But I think the one you're talking about, I think I know it.
That's Time Off in the Cedar Centre in Gran Canaria.
Yeah, it's not in the Yumpo Centre.
No, it's in the other centre.
The other centre.
The other centre in the Cedar.
I've heard stories about straight people booking flats around that area, and people apparently coming into the street and doing stuff.
Yeah.
There was a video going around on TikTok at one point, which was quite fun.
I'm much too old
So you started on the kink scene, or you started going to kink parties, but for the music in your start 20s.
Yeah.
What? So you kind of like, oh, they have the music I want to listen to.
Yeah, so I was and still really am into hard house. I came to London in 1999 for uni. I ended up getting taken out clubbing by somebody else in the halls. She actually took me to a hard trance club, and I can't say it's not where I was first introduced to drugs, because I did try things in my, like, occasionally in my teenage years, but it was where I was introduced to ecstasy.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember this transition that we got into this club, and I was like, what is this noise? How can people listen to this? And she's like, here, take this. It'll be wonderful shortly. And it was. I really enjoyed it. I basically became a trade baby, which, if you were out clubbing sort of 15, 20, 25 years ago, you're probably familiar with the club. It still has some big names, but it was great for hard house. It's where I spent a lot of my time. But yeah, Fist had this reputation of being like having really good hard house, and it was where one of my favorite DJs played, which was Karim. So it was kind of interesting. It also had like all this, like a lot of the cyber goths from Camden went as well. So there was a crowd there that were absolutely there for the music.
Mm.
And it's not like you could ignore the fact that sex was happening, because it did get shut down after reportedly the police did a 6-month undercover police operation and determined that there was drug taking and hardcore sex happening on the premises.
That took them 6 months?
You could have just opened the front door and seen this.
I'm sure the undercover police were having a horrible time.
Yeah, that was the story. I mean, you know whatever happened, like that is why it was shut down. But yeah, back then I was still going for the music. I think I did fool around with guys a bit, but it was before I was anywhere near comfortable with public sex. So yeah, the music was the main draw. I mean, a large part of my history is drugs. I never went to NA. I got everything I needed from AA. Yeah, if I'd have got sober 18 months before I did, I would have probably quite easily gone, oh yeah, I'm an addict as well, because my behavior was. But yeah, I think, my 20s was a lot of music and drugs. Those were like key parts of my life. Most weekends, going out.
Yeah, mine was just sex and drugs, really. But that was most of my 20s and start 30s. So I recognize that. Not necessarily the music. I'm much more of a vocal dance person. Then I'll be on the dance floor. I need a storyline when I go on the dance floor.
I mean, you can sing along to hard house. It's just very repetitive.
Yeah, absolutely. So you say it was mainly music and drugs in your 20s.
Yeah.
So when did you get to a point where it's like, this is getting messy? I know a lot of people, I'm trying not to use the word rock bottom, because everyone has a different story, different, like you say, at the start, you weren't comfortable with public sex. That changed over time.
Yeah.
And drug taking changes over time, and it doesn't have to have a massive breakdown in that way.
Yeah.
But
so I think, there's a few things here. I mean, the ultimately the critical turning point for me was my dad dying as a result of his alcoholism. He ended up with stomach cancer, and we had a joke with our friends. Like, so a lot of my close friendship group have alcohol problems throughout the families and so on, and we always joke, like, how do we deal with our parents' alcohol problems? We drink. And about a month after my dad died, I was drinking daily, and I was very clear what the consequences of that would be, because I'd just seen it happen. And I tried just drying out. I think, and ironically, the first time I stopped drinking alcohol, and they gave me a key worker as well, so I had somebody to go and speak to and talk about what was going on and how I was coping with things. Clearly, I just transferred from alcohol to like just having drugs, which were already very much like part of what was going on anyway. Principally ecstasy and ketamine. Like, I was a clubber, so it was club drugs. The thing is worth clarifying, like, sex and drugs was never really a thing for me, apart from occasionally friends, get fucked up with friends, and then we'd end up fucking.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it was like that was a incidental. So
You're kind of separate to the whole chem sex.
I was separate as the whole chem sex. I mean, I tried those drugs, and they were never for me either.
Lucky you.
Yeah, no. I mean, I do absolutely think that's a lucky escape for me that I tried them and they weren't the thing. I think partly because like with GHB, you can't drink with it. I am absolutely an alcoholic at heart. Like that's.
It's like, well, I can't do GHB. I'm an alcoholic.
I mean, this was it. I mean, the control that had, and thankfully, like when I did it, people were very conscious, maybe because they knew me well enough that they were like, "When did you last have a drink?" And they were, they were very, very, very much attempting to control that to make sure that like I didn't end up in a terrible state.
Yeah.
With Crystal, actually, that was like long before it was even really a thing in London.
Yeah.
It came out of a weekend it was a bank holiday weekend, and we knew we would be out from Thursday night till Monday afternoon.
Jesus Christ.
Right, well, how can we stay awake all weekend?
Yeah.
We're like, oh, let's do that. The come down was horrendous. So those things actually happened quite early on. They were never really part of then what I took. Towards the end of my drinking, to get back on that story, yeah, so I was still using. I had my 6 months dry. I went back to drinking, and the final 18 months or so, what I mostly remember when it comes to drugs is they either didn't work or I was violently ill.
Yeah.
And my brain did not connect the fact that when I was ill, it was probably because of how much I consumed, not because the drugs themselves were bad, which was always my, well, there must be something wrong with them.
Must be wrong with it.
And it's not that something's wrong with them, it's the amount that I consumed. And so that kind of just stopped, because I was just like, well, what's the point? I just spend money and it either doesn't do anything or I'm really ill. So that kind of wound down. But with the alcohol, so I like had a relapse before AA, and my very last day of drinking, actually, I went back to the doctors to get medication again, anti-abuse, because I was like, well, I can't stop, and I also have no desire to stop. That was something about like getting to this rock bottom. And then I went out that evening and I scared the shit out of a friend who came out to try to make sure I was okay. And that was my rock bottom. It was actually I don't want to be that person. Like I terrified a friend who was like really worried about my behavior and what might happen. So yeah, I did. I mean, for me, yeah, very AA to do the gift of desperation thing, but there was definitely a turning point. I did get into recovery thinking I could still take uppers. Mm-hmm. So it's like, well, what's the problem with ecstasy? And they're like, no. No mind-altering substances of any kind was the thing for them. And I'm like, yeah, okay, I'm not going to argue with it. I think I just had this idea that some things would still be able to, go on as normal. And ultimately what I realized was all my addictive behaviors were just about getting out of it, like to be as far out of my body and mind as I possibly could.
I recognize that.
So yeah, I think that kind of simplified things. I'm like, okay, right, it's a non-negotiable, and I'm willing to do whatever, because I didn't want to go back to that place where I was. I mean, something that's like really, really rung true with me recently. There's this phrase. It's something like you can always have your misery refunded whenever you want. It's another it's a really AA thing, and it just it's because of somebody else's drinking that it just keeps coming to me right now. It's just like, well, it is always back out there.
Oh yeah.
If I really wanted it, I could go back to do it, but I hope it never happens, and I don't see any I don't see any fun or joy in kind of going, oh, I'd like to return to that world.
Well, it's like you mentioned with you can always get misery back. It's relapse is not further away than turning around, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can have all the recovery in the world, but as soon as you turn around, that's where the problem is.
Yeah.
And I've definitely had my moments where, fuck it, I want to turn around and just screw, like you say, just like I want to get out of my body.
Yeah.
Get away from my head, which is sometimes the thing that gets in the way for me. So I recognize all that. You mentioned about your dad passing away and you scaring a friend as well. I have an uncle who died of alcoholism. I scared my mum. So that kind of rings true with me. It didn't ultimately stop me to start with, but that fear I thrusted upon my mum by having a psychosis and calling her
Yeah.
in that psychosis. Luckily enough, she'd been with alcoholic men who have had psychosis, so she recognized it was a psychosis of some sort. But that fear still sits in her. And that's something I have to live with, that I caused that kind of pain to another person. We've talked about it since, and kind of try to work through a little bit of that trauma I've caused, but it's still there, and that was definitely a turning point for me.
Yeah.
So I think it's important that we acknowledge that kind of thing. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. So you started going to fetish clubs, but it was mainly for the music. When did you get into kink then? When did that become a thing? Was it before or after you got sober?
It's definitely before. So I think that, yeah, ultimately I started becoming a bit more relaxed in my time at Hard On. Still not into, well, okay, I can't say I wasn't into fisting, like, because we had this idea of the project. We used to do like a few of us were like really
We're
determined.
excavating.
We were really determined, like, want to be able to take a fist, and like it happened a couple of times in my like drinking and using days. But yeah, sure, I went to Hard On. Like, I played around in the play area. I also went to the Hoist more and more regularly. I mean, it definitely featured highly in the end of my drinking. I went to SBN a lot. Obviously, it doesn't take much fetish to turn up naked.
No, but it's still a thing.
It's still a thing. So yeah, went to SBN a lot on Sundays and just would.
For anyone listening or watching, SBN is Stock Bollock Naked. It's nude night that's every Sunday here in London, just for anyone who didn't know.
Yeah, and it was at the Hoist originally before the Hoist closed. It's even so. Like, again, like I said, I never really identified with like any one type of fetish gear. People will hate me because I'm just like, it's just drag to me. It's like, what?
How very dare you?
I know.
Let me storm out of the room now.
I was like, what am I in the mood to wear tonight? Like, so I had skin gear and I had rubber. I had quite a few rubber things. I did have the harness and the little. I had some sports shorts type thing. So it
harness and sports shorts. How original!
I know, yeah, but I had some beautiful like white striped ones from Rob that I spent way too much money on once.
At least they were in leather.
They were, they were leather. Yeah, back in the days where Hard On actually required you to wear fetish gear.
Yeah, not so much anymore.
Not so much anymore. So like I did enjoy it. I enjoyed the crowds, the loads of people that I got on with there, and yeah, I think without getting too like therapy about it, I can recognize that sex with lots of strangers was probably important to me because it made me feel good. It was another thing to like, fill the hole in the soul, as it were. And that's not to say like it was intrinsically bad, but I do understand a bit of my motivation about like completely random sex. And that also now comes from the perspective of knowing, yeah, I can have completely random sex, but it is way, way better to have sex with somebody that I have a connection with. So yeah, it was, a lot of the Hoist. I mean, the interesting, like one randomly interesting is like, but I was always so drunk that, yeah, did I know who I was having sex with? No, not very much. So yeah, it was more just about going out with friends, causing chaos. I think, like at the Hoist, they did have one evening where I went with my best friend, and I was like, "Should we tell them that we're likely to get obnoxiously drunk?" And he's like, "No, let them find out all of their own." And I think we were sometimes seen as an annoyance because we would get really drunk and very loud in the Hoist, and there's people trying to have very serious sex, and there's us screeching around. I mean, I think this is one thing of me where like it's like being out on that scene, like it was a lot about just having fun. It's also why I don't take the wearing the gear so seriously. I'm just like, I'm out here in something comfortable, something that I fancy wearing today. It is something that puts me in a particular community, of other guys who are into fetish. Yeah, I think that was like that back in that day. So I think then to move into like where fetish turned after I got sober, like the first thing actually was like the difficulty of getting to a sober kinky sex life. Because I knew that was still an important thing to me, but it was so tied up with drugs and alcohol that I didn't know where to start. I felt very uncomfortable being out in venues, but I had lots of friends out there. I still wanted to be able to participate, and my close friends still would go out, and we'd go out together. And so I think that then one of the main things was SM gays. That was like a thing I do sometimes, like the Thursday nights at the Hoist, which was like this, like semi-educational, semi-social, semi-being a slut type thing.
Yeah.
And participating in a social group, I think, as well. But it did, yeah, I mean, it took a lot of therapy. Like therapy is a huge part of my time along with AA, but this was like a big topic in therapy. Like, how do I have a sober fetish life? Like, where are the connections? What connections were just because I was drunk or high?
Yeah.
And what part of this is something that I genuinely, I'm genuine to, and think that was also where when I got sober, it's also the first time that I started experimenting with putt play. I did have owner/relationship/ very complicated, messy thing. Ultimately, were in my sort of 18 months to 2.5 years. And one thing I realized about like the putt play, it was a way to get some care. I think there was something, and this is like often a big part of fetish. I think, particularly as a more of a sub. For me, it is a bit part of being looked after and somebody showing me some care and attention, as well as me being able to serve sexually. But there's some like gratification there, that knowing I am making somebody else happy. And I think it was something that was kind of like there a little bit towards the end of my drinking, but it definitely came much more into prominence when I got sober. But when that relationship ended quite badly, I put that away for a long time. So like Mutt, as I became, was hidden away for maybe 8 years, which I think now think is maybe a shame, because it's been quite a healing thing. And I mean, yes, it definitely fits in the fetish community. I kind of realized like I didn't feel like a pup. That was one thing. There were various reasons I didn't feel part of the pup community. But there was definitely something about this kind of animalistic side of things, non-verbal. And as you know, you put a hand in my butt, I start to make dog noises. Like,
yes, you do.
I do. That's a thing. But I think the pup mutt side of things, the gear that comes with it, and the fisting is much more where I think my identity settled. That's what my fetish life has become. It also has given me a sense of community as well. Actually, like there's a whole group of people that this identity I have works really, really nicely with, and people understand that. So yeah, I think that's a very long-winded answer to like where fetish started.
Well, that's what a podcast is for.
Yeah, it's where it kind of started and where it ended. Yeah, and how did it go through the middle? I think
it's interesting when you mention, like, can we call it a persona, Mutt by nature?
Yeah, I think yeah, one of my identities.
One of your identities. We all wear masks. Some wear puppy masks.
Yeah,
and I don't feel I'm definitely also, I have this pup side to me, but it's not the archetype that's now mainstream when it comes to pup play. I was never really a part of that. I hate using the term, but I'm slightly old school pup play, where it's a handler and a pup. That there's not this whole mesh of pups running amok kind of thing, and it's like it works for a lot of people. That doesn't work for me. And I know it does a lot of good, and that's where I recognize some of what you're saying. It's much more the connection with the handler. And that is definitely also what works for me. So when did Mutt by Nature start doing porn?
So this, so how did this start? When did I come back to the UK? So I've been back here for 3 years, I think now, since I was in Germany. So yeah, it's kind of started out. I talked a bit about like the validation side of things.
Mm.
I mean, first of all, I didn't even realize like the whole porn Twitter existed. I'd been on Twitter for quite a while until I realized, there's this all
It's
this other stuff.
filth.
Yeah, there's all the filth that was going on, and I just started by like showing off, like either top or bottom, but never both, because it was a way for people to tell me I was pretty, and
Well, that's nice. It's nice
yeah,
being
I
told
think
you're pretty.
absolutely. Like, and what happened is I was spending too much money on sex toys. That's what happened. And I decided I needed a source of income to pay for my sex toys. And so yeah, I went from like posting some stuff to starting my Just for Fans. Like, of course, like at the beginning, it's like all solo stuff. It's just me like wanking and some pictures. I think also some realization of like, I know where I'm at with my career. I now very much doubt I'm ever going to make a career decision where this is going to be a problem, or at least I hope that is the case. And so I was like, yeah, fuck it, whatever. I'm in my 40s. If I'm going to do it, I may as well do it. And so it just kind of snowballed from there. So it did, yeah. I mean, it started out as being fun. Actually, it started out and continued as being fun. I think this was like one thing for me that like starting to do amateur porn was I'd always just say like I want to fucking film. I'm not really into this idea of content creation. I know that ultimately is what you're doing. Like you're filming something and you're putting it online and you're monetizing it. Yeah. Essentially, I was like, but that's I didn't want to see it purely as something to be monetized. That's like I want to have sex that is authentic for me. So it was very important that I mean, it'll sound shocking, chose partners I was actually attracted to. Because I know some people are like it's it's just
it's just filming. Content. Yeah,
it's just content, and I hoped that like. Of course, like you meet a lot of time you meet those people for the first time, so you're going off a picture and some text messaging, a little bit of like establishing what are the parameters of a play session. But I think having established the parameters and then we just like set up a camera and get going, and like whatever happens.
Yeah.
So that is what started the porn career, and of course, and the popularity was nice, and like occasionally being recognized and stuff. Like it does come down to like there's some validation in it for me. It's nice to be told I'm pretty. That kind of thing. It's also like affording me some opportunities, I think, actually, and some sex toys.
It was mainly the sex toys you started.
It was mainly the sex toys that I started for. I did get some sex toys without having to pay for them. That's nice. Yay. You get to do the bit of promo stuff. But actually, interesting, as you know, it's also how I met my handler, as well as somebody I filmed with very early on, really, in that. So it's kind of interesting, like, though. So then having a handler who was also filming, and having a group of friends where some of us are like all doing porn. There's also another little community here. It's definitely a different community, because we have this weird thing that people want to consume porn, but they somehow think the people that produce it are pariahs and they must be terrible people.
Yeah.
Which is so weird. Like the vast majority of guys that I met through porn are the nicest guys, and it's just like, yeah, they're they're the same as the rest of us. They've just chosen sex work for a living. A lot of the time, but there's nothing remarkable about that choice. It's just they have a different line of work, and and they're as nice and as human as like anybody else that I meet. So I think that was also a thing. There's like I met some really cool people. Also quite bluntly, I got to fuck some people that I really, really, really wanted to fuck. That was another thing. I will not be. I will not pretend I didn't get into it, in knowing there are some guys that I would really, really like to play with, and maybe it would happen one day. If I did that, which it did. But the thing I didn't expect was finding a handler and getting something completely unexpected out of starting porn.
Would you say you were poly before, or is that something that's developed, and how has that been navigating with your partner?
Yeah, whenever the topic of polyamory came up in conversation, my answer was always that I believe I have the capacity to care for and have feelings for more than one person. That's really easy to say before it actually happens for the first time. So actually developing feelings to somebody else, and that the really close connection that that I had with my handler was messy. Actually, it was very unexpected, and it really took me by surprise, and I did not know how to process those emotions at all. And and of course, there's parts of it is just like, do they feel the same? I don't know, like, because this has started out of one thing, and now emotionally it's turned into another for me. And yeah, with my partner, I didn't, to be honest, to start with, like, I didn't know how to address it. We've always had an open relationship. We've always had a policy of honesty. And I hit this point. I was like, oh God, I have to be honest now that I have feelings for another person. And I was, terrified that would actually wreck my primary relationship. But he took it really well. Actually, he was just very practical about it. What does this mean? Am I still the priority? They're like, yes, absolutely. This is for both me and my handler. We both have partners, and we both know, like, our primary partner, the person we've been with for years, is the priority.
Yeah.
This thing that we have on the side is the thing that we have on the side, and it will never be the thing that takes priority. So I think that was another thing, like getting into a polyamorous situation. There were new boundaries to understand, or something, new rules to negotiate, just think things to be, I guess, more clear on when we got into that.
I think when it comes to polyamory, communication is key. Understanding what the other person expects and boundaries and stuff like that. Having been in a throuple in my past, a lot of people were like, oh, that's really sexy, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no, you just have to relate to two people besides one.
It's a lot of work.
It can be a lot of work, but I don't think it's more sexy than any other relationship, to be honest.
Yeah.
It can come with some fun. Of course, yours is slightly different because it's two different entities. Do your primary partner and your handler ever socialize?
We have done. Actually, we had all four of us had we had a barbecue together a few weeks back. Yeah, not so often. Like, so, like the four of us, so like both partners and both me and my handler have done a few bits. It's weird, because like for my handler's partner, he's also not into kink. So like there's this kind of two guys into fisting and porn and all that community, and then our partners who are just not really into it. Like it's not their scene at all. So it's a very I mean, it's clearly like a U-shaped thing, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, everybody gets on, and that works from a socializing perspective.
That's really good that it just works, and you can actually be social with each other, and it's not awkward. Because I could imagine, at least in the start, it could be a bit awkward. It's like, oh, you're that person my partner has feelings for as well.
Yeah, there's the main thing from both sides has been like, if our partner is present, then there's no affection between me and my handler.
Okay.
Like that's the agreement. Like, partners are present, that's the one who gets the affection and the attention. I think that's it's a very fair and reasonable accommodation, really. Like, we're both afforded the space to have another relationship. And actually the limits of, I just need to feel that I'm your primary partner when I'm present is a pretty fair request to make.
Absolutely. So you mentioned a little bit earlier that you've recently stopped the porn.
Yeah, so it's I mean, I would still film should the occasion arise, and I mean, actually, we've got Folsom in the diary later this year, and definitely would. It was just a culmination of like a few different circumstances, I think. I mean, look, one is like, you can't underestimate, if you're trying to put out a video every week, it's hours worth of work. So I have a full-time job. I have my boyfriend, soon to be husband. I have my handler. I have a social life. I have a very big garden to look after. And when I started doing the porn, actually, when I tried to go back to university at night school, as well as doing the porn, we had to have a whole conversation about what's the thing that has to give first.
Yeah.
And absolutely, it was the porn. And now, even though the uni thing didn't work out, I'm like, that is the natural give in my life. It was there for fun and still could be there for fun. I was like, but I just don't have the energy to keep doing it all the time at the moment. And I mean, one thing that's been interesting both about the porn and Twitter is realizing how many other guys out there are sober and into like or they're fisters or they're doing porn or both. So that's another like nice. I think it was another nice thing. It contributed to this idea, like particularly for fisting, which is seen as essentially like a very drug related sex activity. I have now met so many people as a result of Twitter and porn that I'm like, no. It's like it can take you a while to find those people. And I think Twitter is actually a really, despite it being an absolute dumpster fire in general, it is a really good place to find other sober people and show them when you go to events, hopefully you can find those people to play with that, if you're at Folsom or Darklands or whatever. But I think, yeah, I had to dial something back. As you know, I spent many, many weekends this year doing hours and hours of gardening.
I've seen pictures, yes.
You've seen the pictures. Ain't nobody got time to fuck after they spent 15 hours in the garden.
No.
So yeah, the last thing I filmed was threesome with Troy Locke and Big Hands, my handler. I mean, it was really good fun actually. Like we had to come up with a concept that worked for all three of us because Troy is locked and much more, I would say, really on the bondage and domination side of things. But that was also nice. It's another thing that porn's afforded me, actually, like stretching my limits a bit. I have been hit a few times. I have done some impact play. Wasn't necessarily for me, but I think it was good. I should try doing scenes where you get to try out some stuff. I've also enjoyed. But yeah, I'm not saying I won't do it again. I'm just
not fully retired, but you'll make a guest appearance.
Yeah, I'd make guest appearances. Oh, but I mean, like, there's still some people that I would love to film with. And if the opportunity is there, I'm like, I absolutely would do that. Yeah, there's a few people I talked to that I'm like, please visit London.
There's definitely people I talk to on X or Twitter, whatever you call it. Kind of like, if you ever come to London, and not that I particularly film content, but I would just like to play with them.
Yeah,
and of course, like doing the podcast and so on, I meet people as well, so there's some interaction there. So during Darklands, you did a class with your handler around sober and fisting. How did that come about?
So my handler, so the context here, one thing is my handler is not in recovery or anything, but social drinker, never done drugs. But when he started getting into fisting, he couldn't find sober people. Okay, so that was like a number one problem. That, like, also living in London, he thought that this was everybody, like they were always hiring kids, and it just didn't work for him. And so, like, he's been like generally like a sober fister. I mean, maybe like one or two drinks, but like not always present. I can't even remember how the whole conversation came about how we ended up being asked to do it, or whether we wanted to do a talk. But we had kind of talked about the idea, like, it would be good to communicate, like, just what is our experience. I think this is like one of the first things, like, this is our experience of fisting sober. This is like what it's been like to be part of what is honestly a much smaller subset of the fisting community. And therefore, a bit harder to find. And unfortunately, like, it is less accessible because it is fewer people who would play like that. But there were just some practical. I think like the main practicalities was to talk about, like, what is important when you are fisting sober, and a lot of it boiled down to connection and trust. So I said about like that connection is an important thing for me, and you being present, and knowing that many people have said, oh, like, I can only get fisted if I'm high, if I'm drunk, basically if I'm kind of at it, because I can't relax enough.
Yeah.
And ultimately, like, I know that that's not true, because, like, number one, if anatomically you've been able to take a fist, like, you're able to take it. And then number two, I was like, I take absolutely nothing. Like, and I had to train. This is another thing. Like, okay, so what's part of a sober fisting journey is like, well, it does involve training. Like, unfortunately, you have to say like, no, it's not just going to be that you're going to turn up with your relatively tight butthole and somebody's going to get a fist in there. Like, no, part of this is going to be like, you have to do some homework.
Mm.
And then the other part's like, okay, you've done your homework, right? Okay, what does it look like to have a good sober session? And we've talked about it's just like things that you might talk about beforehand. I mean, we got some other guys to do videos on various parts of this thing. I mean, one thing we still laugh about is like, Pup Davey going, cut your nails. I mean, this should be like fisting 101.
Yeah.
Like, it shouldn't even need to be part of sober fisting, but then you're like, okay, so what do you do in this situation? Like, okay, like let's check your hands. Have you done the like? But even that's just part of an initial conversation to establish like some comfortable boundaries. Are you prepared? What state are you in? What is sober fisting for me? What is sober fisting for you? Have we got the same definition? Are our respective boundaries going to be okay? Because it does mean different things to different people. So I think just that like a lot of this very conversational side of things we want to talk about, like this is what it looks like for us. There's still, the tricky point that we can't solve is how do you find these people?
Yeah.
Or even more tricky, I have been using chems, I want to stop, but nobody that I fists with wants to.
Yeah.
Like, there's no magical answer here. Like, I can repeat the same things. Like, I'm obviously got the benefit of living in London. Like, so there's a critical mass of gays here. But I do also know that like my fisting social group comes from relatively most of the south of England. And guys will make the efforts to be part of a sober group. So it's not impossible that if you're living, we're in London here, like I know guys in Plymouth and Southampton and Bristol, and they travel to events. So like it's not impossible. People will make the effort. So have some faith that it is out there. But also that bit like, there is no magic answer. You want to play sober and they don't, like that's about establishing a boundary that's comfortable for you. So it was, a feeling of like, I want to do this talk because I want to talk about it. I want other people to hear, like, principally, it is possible to fist sober. Yes, it might be a journey. It's probably a much bigger journey if you were a chemsex fister. And that's part of why we asked some other people's opinions as well, because like that's neither of our experiences. But I totally know from speaking to those guys, I'm like, that is not an easy transition to make. It's a lot longer. I've seen for guys who were into fetish fisting chemsex to make that transition back into a sober fetish and fisting life.
Well, for me, is I've been fisted 3 times, and it's always been on drugs. And I'm coming up to 7 years, and I haven't explored that venture yet. It's just finding play partners to do it with. And that's always been a problem. I joined a WhatsApp group with like a big fisting WhatsApp group, which is here in London, or a little bit awry. I had to leave it so quickly because it was so full of chems. And it's not a criticism of the group. It's fine. It's like that's for each to their own when it comes to fisting. But I cannot deal with that. So I literally just like, do you know what? This is not for me. This is a bit triggering. And seeing other people who do it sober like you does give me hope that I eventually can. But with fisting, it's like, it's not a rush. It'll happen when it happens.
It's definitely not a rush.
No, yeah. I've had someone where I was playing, and this was even on chems, and I think there were like 3 guys trying to fist me, and they couldn't get in. I was just like, it was not happening.
Yeah.
And one of the guys got impatient and just forced it in. That ended that play session quite quickly. Nothing bad happened. There was a little bit of blood, but that is the situation you get in when people are not thinking clearly. Or about consequences. And that's what you were saying, is like you need the connection. If they're somewhere else, they're not thinking about you, they're just thinking about the action. And I could have easily gotten really hurt in that situation. So I'm quite lucky on that front. But you doing that class in Darklands is so important, because I'm sure some of the people who were there were still chemsex users, but they were kind of just looking for a way out. Because I think a lot of people who try to become sober, the sticking point is the fisting. There's a lot of people where the sticking point is always the fisting. I've heard it so many times, like, well, I can't be able to fist anymore. And it's like, oh, well, then I don't want to get sober. And it's so important to have someone show that it is possible. It's not easy, but it's possible. So I was really happy that you did that with Big Hands FF, because it's so important.
Yeah, I think the other bit is, yeah, I think it makes it like, I mean, obviously, if it's anatomically possible, it's going to be possible. I think that fear of losing something, I think, you know, I probably like was lucky in that, like, when I got sober, I mean, I absolutely was desperate to get sober. Like, there were no other factors that I was just like, oh, what about this? What about that? I think I mean, I probably felt with the loss of my clubbing life a bit. That was because that was a big part of my life. But even now, like, I mean, I not so often, but I've been out to hard house events and techno events, you know, the nice ones that happen in the daytime for the over 40s.
The ones where you could sit down because your knees are going.
Yeah. I mean, I'm now at this stage in my recovery, like, I can be present in that environment. I make my choices carefully. I make my choices about, like, sex environments. It's the same thing. Like, we kind of talked about the few places they've been to. Like, there can be this point, he said, like, maybe 2-3 a.m. in the morning, where the vibe will change in a club, and it's the point where, you know, most people's drugs have more than kicked in, and, you know, and the feeling can change a little bit. And what I say about that is, like, yeah, but you can get there early and have lots of fun up until, like, you know, 1 a.m., 2 a.m.
Yeah.
And, like, and when you're done, you're done. So I think I can totally understand the fear of, like, oh, I won't be able to do, you know, I won't be able to fist again. I won't be able to go to fetish events again. I won't be able to, you know, go in other venues where alcohol and drugs are present. Like, it will take some time. I was really lucky that my close friends who I went out with voluntarily stayed sober when we were out together. And I was really like, no, like, you have whatever. I was like, but when you get wasted, I'm leaving, and that's not a bad thing. I was just like, but I don't want you to not enjoy yourselves at my expense. But they were like, no, it's fine. Let's all get fucked up on Red Bull together, which obviously a very healthy attitude to say, let's get fucked up on Red Bull. You know, we'd have 4 Red Bulls and be bouncing off the walls for a few hours. But yeah, I think, you know, I had some people around my recovery who were like, this is really dangerous. You're going out to venues, you know, you're going out to wet venues and so on. And this phrase of, if you go to the barbers enough times, eventually you'll get a haircut. I love all these phrases. I was like, I get what you're saying. I feel and felt that I had a good enough handle on things, and I had enough support. I think that was probably much more critical. I had enough support that I could have my bit of fun and then go. I think, like, even now, come back to, like, sober fisting, which did take, like, I wasn't really, like, fully, like, into fisting until 4 years ago, maybe. I played a bit in Berlin. It was difficult to, again, the same thing, like finding play partners. Like, I played a bit, like, out in lab and so on, but there were only occasional guys I could play with in private. And actually, and I enjoyed that so much more when I had that connection, and, like, you know, and we were all sober. And then it was when, you know, when I got back to the UK, and actually really when I started doing the porn, I was like, yeah, I really enjoy this. I enjoy the sex, I enjoy the people I meet, you know, we can do it sober, it all works out nicely. And I think I made the joke at my last class. I was like, I'm not telling everybody to start doing porn as a way of connecting to a sober fisting community, as, like, but it has played a large role in me establishing, you know, that community of people around me who are all like, that is their preference.
I've definitely felt that since you done fisting porn and you've been quite vocal about being sober, I've seen more fisters who do porn pop up and saying, actually, I'm also sober, or at least trying to be sober. It feels like you're given an okay for people to actually mention it. It's like, actually, I don't do anything when I do this. It probably also has that ripple effect. It's like, oh, it's actually important to say.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because a lot of people watch this as like, oh, they're probably on something. Oh, I've watched porn where just like it's very obvious they're on something,
Yeah.
but in generally, I think a lot of porn stars don't really do anything when they're having fun.
No, I mean, at least, I mean, I've always been absolutely clear up front as like, if we're filming, it's filming sober.
Yeah.
I've had some guys who are like, oh, I have a bit of weed. And because I don't know them and I do not know what a bit of weed means to them, I'm like, yeah, no, that's not for me.
That's a hard boundary.
It's a hard boundary as an upfront negotiation thing, just because I don't know what that means to you. But then ironically, the reason I found out that like being totally sober was not where my boundary was for another person was years ago in Berlin. I met a guy who I'm still friends with now, and he was like totally with it, and I was just like, I don't understand. And his husband, bless him, was shit-faced drunk. I was like, I mean, I really would, but like, that is not the state I want to play with somebody. Yeah, and then my friend was like, oh, I'm just gonna go to the toilets and smoke a bit of weed. I was like, oh, okay. So like, actually, like, you are a bit high, but like, as far as I'm concerned, you're present. And that was something I was like, okay, well, I know I can play with him, and I know, and I have confidence, like, yeah, he might have had some weed, but it's never going to be so much that I would feel uncomfortable or that he would be out of it. So I think there was a bit of, learning where those boundaries are, and starting to do a lot more like trusting, like, there's a bit of like a visual assessment, particularly in public places. And this came back to like one of the topics in the class is like, if you want to fist sober out in a sex event, like, then just pay attention to what's going on. Like, try to establish, like, does this person look like they're sober enough for me to play with?
And also bring your own lube, because if you borrow someone else's lube, they may have spiked it and you don't know.
Yeah, there is that.
It does happen.
Yeah, I have heard that. Thankfully, it's never happened to me. I mean, I do have my special lube mix that has my magic ingredient is a bit of Voltarol. Yeah, so like, I mean,
Everyone watching now making notes.
Yeah,
like,
make
Voltarol.
the notes so you can see my recipe. I've got a video online of me making it up. But actually, this is a really interesting thing. I have played with guys where I think they're struggling a bit to open up, and I'm like, I think a bit of my lube would help, but I always ask, as like, I think a bit of my greasy lube would help. It's got X lube and aqueous cream and a bit of Voltarol. Are you interested in trying that and seeing if it works? And some guys have said yes, and some guys have gone, no, I just want to stick to my lube. But like, absolutely, I wouldn't just go and do it. I'm just like,
no.
And it's not that there are drugs in there technically, because there's Voltarol in there. But yeah, I was just like, I will establish that you are okay with this. And 9 times out of 10, yeah, that was exactly what we needed. Just needed some grease in your butt, basically. So yeah, I mean, that's another part of that sober fisting journey, like having to work out what is your magical mix of lubricant that maybe makes up for the fact that, like, yes, previously you would have had chemicals that have opened your butt wide open. Now we're going to have to do a little bit more hard work, and that might involve trying to work out what is the magical concoction of lubricant that works for your butt.
Yeah, I don't think I've gotten to that point where I figured out what works with mine. So I may have to try your recipe.
Yeah.
It's a little cooking program.
There is. I think I literally filmed that one in the kitchen.
Just to round the episode off, and just to have a little bit of a fun topic at the end. Not that the other topics haven't been fun. How did you get into Star Trek?
There's a funny bit of me because I'm an addict. No. So, and I will.
You've just seen my movie collection upstairs, so yes.
So there is a rational explanation even for that silly answer. Like, I have been a Trekkie since I was a kid. I watched the original series and all the movies, and then basically I really got into Star Trek Voyager. That's the one that was like when I was, I guess, 12, 13, 14 was the main one that's on TV. So Voyager was, as with many gays, Voyager is their favorite because of Captain Janeway. And yeah, I mean, I've always been into sci-fi. So here's the funny thing about, like, where I say because I'm an addict. I have realized I'm laughing now, as an addict with trauma, as well, and childhood trauma.
Yay! I have that one as well. Yay!
Yeah, that sci-fi and fantasy was probably my first form of escapism.
Mm-hmm.
I've realized that, but even acknowledging that's like maybe what happened as a child, like I'll laugh because I am the one who will sit there and shout at the TV when they do things that aren't canon and don't fit in the timeline, or like
it must have hurt you watching Discovery.
I mean. Oh, yeah, it kind of does, because you've got this tension of I want to make it look futuristic, but we've set this further back in time than the original series. Yeah, so that was really tricky. I love the fact that in Strange New Worlds, in the first episode, there is literally a joke about, the bridge looks much bigger, because of course this set is huge compared to the original series. I think. I mean, like I said about like how being geeky and like funny is also something for me. I also always like the fact that Star Trek has this like levity about it. It has its funny moments. I really love. I mean, I also like really dark sci-fi, but I like sci-fi that's just like they don't know how to like have a laugh sometimes and have some silly episodes. But there's this stuff that's just serious. Yeah, it doesn't work for me.
I think for me, at least with Star Trek Discovery, watching the final, it was good, but I had no emotional connection to it. I was a little bit like, I'm okay, this is ending. Where I think they've gotten it right with Strange New Worlds. Like singular stories, very much great humor, but also really serious and scary episodes as well. I'm absolutely in love with that series because it doesn't take itself serious.
Yeah,
there's some gems of episodes in there. I'm very much Picard.
I've just been rewatching. Yeah, I started rewatching Picard. I mean, I love Patrick Stewart. It's really awful now finding out like some of the history of like him and Star Trek, about how he just didn't think it was going to go anywhere, and he was really standoffish in the first series.
Well, he's like Shakespearean educated, and it's just one of those kind of the jokes, isn't it?
Yeah. And he called Marina Sirtis a stupid cow. This was like one of this. There was like whole. It's the same as with Jerry Ryan and Kate Mulgrew. And there's this whole thing about like just thinking that Jerry Ryan was brought in basically because she had big boobs and she was pretty. And I was like,
well, she did have big boobs.
She does have big boobs.
Yeah. And she's running around in the spandex suit the whole bloody time.
I just remember her whole thing about her favorite food is cheesecake, and she could not eat cheesecake whilst filming Voyager because of that spandex. But yeah, I mean, that is my level of geekery. I was, we're quite into it and the characters and know the actor's name. And now what I have is a depth gauge. It's very handy. Not many people have hidden the nacelles on this, but it is super handy when people go, "How deep do I go?" And I'm like, I can point to you. Got right to here.
You got to the captain's seat.
Yeah.
Well, mine is just like, do you want a valve or a consonant? So it's. But that's really fun. It's just like, where are we getting to today? Where on the ship are we getting to? That's fantastic. So if anyone's listened to this or watched, where can they get a hold of you? And if they want to talk to you and have some questions?
Probably best on Twitter or X. I'm Mutt by Nature. I'm also Mutt by Nature on Instagram as well. So both of those profiles are open. So probably the best places to message. Like, I think the only thing to say is just like, I have it set up that if I'm not following you, like you go into the folder that I have to pay more attention to go and see if things are in there. But yeah, I do look at those folders.
Thank you for coming on. It's been so much fun to talk to you. Time is flying by, really, to be honest. And we've explored a lot of things. And thank you for sharing and being honest.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Thank you. So this was the season finale of season 7. So I already have a lineup for season 8. It won't be a 6-month break like last time, but I will take a little break now. But go out, have safe fun, practice when it comes to fisting if you want to do it sober, because you can do it. Yeah, go out and have fun, have kinky fun, stay clear-headed, as sober as sexy. Bye.